Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for joining us today. Today's topic, I'm bringing it up here, is going to be the SharePoint 2010 top new BI features with SQL Server. So the series of these online events that we do, we thank you for joining us to learn more about these topics too, by the way. But these are all focused on SQL Server, database, business intelligence, data warehousing, all those different areas that fall within SQL Server and SharePoint as well. And with SharePoint in that world with Microsoft, that really has to do with getting access to data from your knowledge workers, from your end users, your customers. And with SharePoint, that's usually focused around business intelligence. And within Microsoft, the overall stack of products, if you look at business intelligence as a product, there's not really necessarily just a product for business intelligence at Microsoft. It's more you need SQL Server, you need SharePoint, and you need Office to really get the full experience within business intelligence. So I'm going to talk to you about that a little bit today. We'll do some demonstrations of the current functionality, the current new features in 2008 R2 of SQL Server, which is the latest edition of SQL Server that's on the market today. It's 2008 R2. This is always going to be using SharePoint 2010 today as well. And what else do I want to say? It's also, well, I'll also talk about and demonstrate for you some of the brand new version of SQL Server things, which is SQL Server 2012, sometimes referred to in some of these, some of the slides and some of the material will be referred to as Denali, which is the old version. Which is the old name of SQL Server, was the project name internally at Microsoft for the announcement in October of 2011 at our past summits. And there we announced that the new product name is going to be SQL Server 2012. Alrighty, so let's get started on the top new features for Microsoft Business Intelligence and SharePoint. The first thing that I want to say is just to let you know who I am. I am Mark Cromer, that's Kromer, and I work for Microsoft in the role that is known as a SQL Server Technology Specialist, which means that all I do within Microsoft is I focus on just the data platform, and data platform at Microsoft is really SQL Server. It's SQL Server, and when you have a lot of large databases and data warehouses that could also be our appliances. So the SQL Server world at Microsoft and the data platform at Microsoft is really, if you think of it outside of Xbox, it's the only really area within Microsoft that goes beyond software. We also sell appliances for SQL Server, and we also sell appliances for business intelligence, and that's called the Business Decision Appliance as well. So I focus on talking to customers about how they deploy SQL Server, what the roadmap for SQL Server is, best ways to leverage the data platform, what's coming, what's going away, those kinds of things. So that's what I do. And so the agenda, let's see, we're going to focus first on an overview, give you the lay of the land in terms of Microsoft BI and business intelligence. That'll include the roadmap, a little bit of discussion on SharePoint 2010, and then which is of course on the market today, as well as the latest edition of SQL Server, version of SQL Server that's on the market on our price list, which is SQL Server 2008 R2. And then, like I said earlier, we'll also talk about the new version coming out, SQL Server 2012. Since we are here in December of 2011, you should know that you can get an early copy of SQL Server 2012. It is available in the release candidate. Just go to Microsoft.com, search for SQL Server 2012, and you can download and use that today. If you would like to get some support for that early early release of 2012, and you want to use it for something that you're trying out, maybe a brand new project, you can sign up for an early adopter as well. So just go to Microsoft.com, you can find all that data, all that information. Business intelligence is SharePoint. So our focus today is going to be how you work with BI in SQL Server through SharePoint, and that's going to include performance point services, Excel services, and Power Pivot, which is brand new in SQL Server 2008 R2, which is the the in-memory analytics capability for SQL Server and SharePoint that allows for what we call self-service business intelligence or self-service analytics. And then within SQL Server 2012, some brand new things that are also top new features for you to look at. The BI semantic model is a new way to describe your data and your analytics and to get that same in-memory analytics capability out of SQL Server that is today available to you through Power Pivot. That's what that enables. Power View sits on top of that semantic model and gives you a Silverlight-based version of the SQL Server reporting tools, and the SQL Server reporting is called SQL Server Reporting Services, or SSRS. And I'll give you some of the updates in that product. You'll notice that I don't focus too much in today's time that we have. We only have about an hour. So I'm going to try to go pretty quick and at least give you information about everything that's out there, and you can always go and dig some more into it afterwards. We're also going to have a bunch of follow-up sessions where we do pick a few of these and dive deeper into things one by one at a time. The reporting services, to be honest with you, because it also works outside of SharePoint, isn't necessarily a SharePoint feature, and so that's why we don't really focus on it too much here. There's a lot to cover with reporting services as well, and you can have a standalone outside of SharePoint. You can also embed reports from reporting services into your .NET applications. So a lot of different ways that you can use it, and we'll focus on that in other sessions. But today we'll talk about top new features in SharePoint with SQL Server BI. Now, just so you understand the stack of business intelligence, if you were to come to me and say, Mark, I would like to buy Microsoft BI, use it in my business, I would not tell you here is the SKU, go order it from your software reseller. Instead, what I would say is you would have these parts of the Microsoft taxonomy in order to use Microsoft BI. And that includes from the bottom up, we start with SQL Server, and that is the overall data infrastructure and BI platform from Microsoft. If you look at the things that are within that list there on the right hand side, in terms of what's part of the platform, you'll notice analysis services, reporting service, all these different services essentially, master data integration, everything that really provides the brains and the brawn and the heavy lifting, is within the SQL Server box. So you get these capabilities. A lot of them you get right out of the box with the standard edition of SQL Server. Some of these, like master data, is only available to you in the enterprise edition. However, what is nice about this is that you don't have to purchase anything separate. If you are using SQL Server today in your enterprise, in your company, you can absolutely use Microsoft BI. And those things are giving you capabilities like, for example, analysis services is the ability to build your cubes, to build multidimensional models. With SQL Server 2012, that's also a way to create what are called tabular models and use that BI semantic model to describe your data in ways that is very meaningful for your business users. And so your business users can then create their own pivots off of that data with in-memory analytics. Very exciting stuff. Reporting services, of course, I said that would be another time. Integration services is really all about data movement and data integration and data transformation. So really think of that as extract, transform, and loading, ETL tool, integration services. Master data services, that's essentially the ability to have a tool in place in your business that can help you to accomplish what's known as master data management, or creating governance and stewardship over your data, and to ensure that you're all singing from the same sheet of music across all your systems within your enterprise, and that way that you can have your data warehouse representing your entities like your customers and your products the same way as your transactional systems are. And then the other areas, data mining and data warehousing, not really necessary to do a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today in terms of BI, but there are ways that enable you to improve those things. Data mining will give you those predictive analytics capabilities and the abilities to dig into your data and to get more value back to your business from all those data assets that you are storing and you are securing in your SQL Server. A lot of, usually, I guess I'll say usually, but a lot of times, that data mining capability within a business comes later after you've accomplished a lot of the baseline dashboarding and scorecarding, the more common business intelligence capabilities and features that you see in solutions today. And then data warehousing is, that's the ability to store your data and do historic trends on it, large amounts of data, do data archiving within SQL Server. And then in the middle section we have SharePoint 2010. So this is this is just focused on what SharePoint has from BI, and in BI in 2010 and SharePoint is really nice because it comes as part of a site collection that's known as the business intelligence site type. And what's really nice about that is that you get these capabilities with SharePoint. You get the ability to build scorecards and dashboards with what's known as performance point services. You can essentially turn your Excel spreadsheets into shared dashboards through Excel services. You can put workflow and forms. You can create your own forms and your own workflow around all that data and business assets. And then you get the additional capabilities of SharePoint that add an element to BI that you don't really get from other tools and out there in the market today. You get that integrated collaboration, the fast search you get the search capabilities of SharePoint, the content management and integration into your other lines of business systems outside of what you might happen to be surfacing through BI and data warehousing. And then last but not least, at the very top there is the Office suites, Office 2010. And it's very important, especially when you start building those data cubes and the in-memory cubes with SQL Server, in that you will want to have a tool that your customers are comfortable using to be able to access the analytics. And Excel is really the world's most popular BI tool if you think about it. And it's the tool that most of your users who are in finance or accounting or in sales, they live in Excel, and that's where they want to stay, and that's where they want to get at those data assets, and they want to pivot on their sales and marketing information. So that's why Office is on there, and especially when you start talking about within the SQL Server 2008 R2 product line is the feature called Power Pivot, which is the current in-memory analytics capability, and that's primarily done through Excel. I'll demo that for you here today. So what does the roadmap look like? Where are we going? How did we get here? 2007 is really when the BI stack was built out completely within Microsoft. At least that's kind of my take on it. And the reason why I say that is because that was around the time that the acquisition of a BI tool that was very popular in the market called ProClarity was made. It was around that time. Was it 2006? Well, it was around that time anyway. And that became integrated into the SQL Server and the SharePoint products. And then in the 2008 timeframe, we released SQL Server 2008 that really was taken to market after the Office wave in 2007 and ahead of the 2010 wave. So what happened then was, after SQL Server 2008 came out, when all these great new features in Office and SharePoint came to the market in terms of things like the BI sites and the Power Pivot in Excel, an R2 version of SQL Server was released, and that was called SQL Server 2008 R2. And we even put out at the same time, around the same time, we even put out data warehousing specific versions of SQL Server, which would be the massively parallel processing version of SQL Server, or Parallel Data Warehouse, PDW. And then the SMP version of SQL Server that also includes hardware specs for it, or a reference architecture that's known as Fast Track. So now you can, starting with the 2010 refresh of the roadmap, you look at that and you can say, now I can get the entire solution with this line here from Microsoft, and that is that I can have my high performance data warehouse with the appropriate hardware. I can stand up that data warehouse and I can provide the business value back to my users through SharePoint and through Office. And then late of this year, 2011, was the first release of the SQL Server 2012 release candidate, which is available today. And then I mentioned at the bottom the BDA, so that the bottom Row is really appliances. If you think about it that way, the parallel data warehouse is a hardware software appliance. Fast Track is a appliance like or light, if you want to think of it that way. It's essentially an assemble your own, but you receive a bill of materials from one of our hardware partners like Dell and HP, and there are a few others too. And then the BDA is the business decision appliance. I mentioned this earlier. This is, if you like a lot of the things that I'm going to show you today in terms of the brand new BI capabilities in SQL Server R2, such as the Power Pivot capability through SharePoint, we have an appliance, an analytical appliance that you can purchase that has the configurations already there for you to optimize and maximize your use of those tools. Because think about it for a second. The Power Pivot in memory analytics is going to need a very large amount of RAM on that server, and so it's going to be a rather significantly different configuration on that server that you would utilize as opposed to, say, a SQL Server I don't say standard, but a regular SQL Server OLTP sort of configuration. So that's why we partnered with HP on this one, to have an appliance that you could look at to be able to just purchase that and not worry about all those configurations. All right, let me do a quick time check here. I think I'm going to go for about a few more minutes here, and then I'll demonstrate for you all these different things and how they look in R2 and in SharePoint today. So the idea of BI being in SharePoint is that SharePoint is really within the Microsoft ecosystem. It is the primary platform that we have for collaboration, access to data across your enterprise, to be able to discover that data and to be able to act on it. And there's a huge element of self-service within SharePoint too, and this all plays perfectly with the Microsoft concept of business intelligence. And if you want to think of it, all the different sort of terminologies that Microsoft has used around BI over the past couple of years, like the democratization of BI and those sorts of things. And that's why SharePoint is very effective as the publishing and tool for you to use for BI within Microsoft. And then what you essentially do is you utilize all these different capabilities and services that fall within the SharePoint umbrella. And with SharePoint, as you stand it up, you get the ability to provide insights to users through different, all kinds of different, form factors, from a browser on a PC to a browser on a mobile device. You also get these services that provide those insights, like the performance point services. I'll show you that in a little bit. Excel services, which to me is really I love this one, because I like, as my background coming from many years as a developer and as a database administrator, I don't know, it was just the way that I guess I was trained, is that I didn't really necessarily enjoy report writing, and I was never really good at it, to be honest with you. I'm not a great designer. And so with Excel services, you can allow your users to use the tool that they love and they hold close to their hearts. God love them for that. But it's Excel, and so Excel services kind of lets them create their own dashboards and their own reports through that, and then you can share those through SharePoint, through a BI site that makes it feel a lot like this is a dashboard that somebody created, and now the rest of your organization and your enterprise is able to benefit from that value that one person has brought to the entire company. Okay, so you can also expose BI through Visio. Visio is an interesting way to do that. You can do things like strategy maps, and you can map KPIs to different blocks and different graphics on the Visio diagram. And let me see if there's anything else on this that I want to say. I think what I'll do is I'll skip over the rest of the overall architecture of SharePoint for now, and just go into some demos on that. So, I think this does a pretty good job here of sort of bringing this together. The sites within SharePoint that you're going to use for BI is going to give you a one-stop shop to be able to build very exciting dashboards and portals for users to get to business intelligence and to be able to make better decisions. At the end of the day, right, that's what we're trying to accomplish here. That's what we're all trying to do, whether you're in SQL Server or SharePoint. if you're a DBA developer, BI developer, or if you're a business user and you don't know any of the stuff I'm talking about, we all have the same goal, and that is to help our business make better decisions. And that's what BI is all about, and that's what SharePoint does. And at the bottom on the screen, because we're not going to focus on it too much today, I just want you to know that the integration from BI Development Studio and Report Builder and all those different things that are in SQL Server reporting services is there in R2, 2008 R2. In SQL Server 2012, those capabilities are still there, made even better with a Silverlight version of that tool. What you're looking at down there right now at the bottom picture is from Visual Studio. And what's nice is what's known as Power View is an addition to reporting services in 2012 and gives business users the capability to make Silverlight based compelling animated visuals that does not need any kind of a client tool to do that. It's all URL based. So a quick overview, and then we'll take a look at Performance Point if you haven't seen it. 2010 is integrated completely into SharePoint 2010. It used to be a standalone tool back in the day. It is no longer. You can include reports that you either create in Performance Point services, or you could include external reports, like you could include reports from reporting services. You can include reports from Visio. There are many different sources you can use. You can create one of the primary ways that business users, at least that I work with, use Performance Point is to create scorecards and dashboards with those scorecards. The scorecard is on the left-hand picture there at the top. Back before Performance Point services, you had to have a tool from Microsoft that was called what the heck was that called? It was called Business Scorecard Manager. And this is much better than that. It incorporates some of the nice features that were there in ProClarity within Performance Point as well. And yeah, this just repeats everything that I just said. So there you go. All right. So before we go into the next part, let's take a look a little bit at Performance Points, and let's see, where do I have this running on here? Let's see if it's on here. Yep, I have it on here. So what I want to do is I want to start you off with a picture. So I'm a little bit myself, based on my own lineage, I'm a little bit partial to the telco. This is an example of what's called Contoso Communications dashboard. This is SharePoint 2010 using SQL Server 2008 R2. You see some Performance Point on here and down here. And I can tell by right-clicking on here, and you see these are the capabilities here within Performance Point. So by the way, this is let me finish that thought for a second. The reason why I'm partial to the communications dashboard was because this comes from a project that I had worked on and pioneered years ago, and I think it still makes a lot of sense to a lot of different people, because even though this is specific to telecommunications, this is all about your customers and getting that 360 degree view of your partners, of your customers, the full view of your customers, and what are they buying, what's working, what's not working. And that's a huge advantage that businesses that leverage BI in general, not just Microsoft BI, but just the concept of BI, have over businesses that don't. And so what you do here is you have the different scorecards appear on your dashboard from Performance Point. And these are your metrics, right? These are things like employee satisfaction. Let's go over here to churn. So this is based on different regions within the data sets, and you can have your trends, you can have the actual number, and what was your target, and how are you performing against the target. This is that concept of the the business-oriented balanced scorecard. And then on the right-hand side at the top is a web part that features these are some dials that came with the Reporting Services 2008 and SQL Server. So this is Reporting Services 2008 style of reporting that you can include in here on your dashboard as well. And what do I want to say about that? Those are the Dundas sort of 3D controls, very nice controls that come with reporting services. So I don't know if let me try it on here. I think I have this working better in a different demo, but I'll show this anyway. What's really nice about Performance Point is that there were these really cool capabilities around your own drill down and your own analytics that you could perform on the fly. So this is a dashboard and scorecard concept where somebody has thought of these things, and hopefully they did enough homework and they talked to the business to figure out what it is exactly you want to measure. But inevitably, as you are looking at this data and as you're exploring it, you want to do some of your self exploration on these things. And there was this concept of what's called a decomposition tree that came from ProClarity. And so the way that you access that now is through Performance Point. And what I did was I right-clicked on that Performance Point chart in the background, and I said decomposition tree. And so now what I'm doing is I'm looking at a specific dimension of my data, and I'm looking now at this region that is the West. I can now do my own exploration, go beyond what was given to me from that scorecard and that dashboard, and I can now look at different ways of looking at my data. And let's say, for example, that I want to look at the devices, the device names for the West, and I can see what takes up the, what is the most common within that whole set of data within device name. And then from there, I can just keep drilling. I can now go over to, let's say I want to look at service from, what did I pick? Mobile 1007, the service name from there. And I can see that, the 80%. Oh, actually, what I can do is I can see all the different numbers from these different dimensions, right? I can see going right up the stack from west to the from the west up to the device name up to the service name. And it's easy to see by looking at the way that it uses these. By the way, this is all Silverlight-based graphics on here. The way that it uses the filler in terms of how much of one dimension member is compared to the others. So it's very easy to visualize that through this sort of graphic. And that's called the decomposition tree. You get that capability when you put these kind of graphs, analytical charts on your dashboard through Performance Point. So that's what an end result looks like. I like this one. I think this one's pretty good. They kept some of those things that we had put in there way back when we first made this dashboard, including the ticker at the top. The ticker at the top is somewhat useful. I think that it's a little bit more just kind of a demonstration of what you could do there. I don't know. We used to have this concept when we did these kinds of projects, and we would say that pick your top 5 KPIs, and those would become the KPIs that scroll across the top. Now, the way that you build these then is that you use what's known as the dashboard designer, or the design tool within Performance Point services. And let me just show you how I got here, by the way. I was playing with this earlier, and I didn't want to minimize all that. But when you're in a BI site within SharePoint, you'll have you can have a category where you can collect your different content around your dashboards and your Performance Point data, or your Performance Point content, and that would sit in this case right here. And in fact, what you can do, let me go actually to the home page for my site. Right here, you're able to see that this is a BI Center site, and you can then launch your dashboard builder right from here. So you're able to launch it right from there, and then when you do it, it uses that click once capability, the same way that SharePoint utilizes the report builder within SQL Server reporting services. And then you build out your content. And so what I did was I just made a data connection out to a cube. Now I was not using the enterprise cube, the mech data that you saw there. I was using instead of VentureWorks, just because this is probably what you would have at home. And you can do this test. So I'm assuming here, because I'm going to do some analysis on data for a dashboard, that I'm going to connect into analysis services. So I use for my data source a analysis services database, but you can use their sources like Excel services or SharePoint list or just another SQL Server table, and then just categorize for you. So you make your connection out to your data source, and then you create the different content in here. And so to make the simplest one that I could, what I do is I started with creating a KPI, and I said that the KPI is going to be based on this value, which is reseller order count, which is a measure within that cube. And then I just used a hard-coded value for what I want the target to be, and I want it to be around 100, which actually I think is low, so I'm going to make that be 1,000. And then you can set down here, you can change how you essentially want the red, yellow, green, the good, bad, not so good values to be within the scorecard. This is for the KPI. And then what you do is you put those KPIs onto a scorecard, and then those KPIs that you create drop into your details pane over here, and then you drop those into your scorecard, and then I build a dashboard from that. So I created the simplest dashboard, which is just one element on it, but you can have dashboards that have all kinds of different, things on it from performance point. Like these are the different reports. You can have different. You can use different kinds of indicator graphics as well as a whole slew of different things you can use for that. But when you create your dashboard, then you say that you want to have it, with maybe something like the header with 2 columns. You could have a filter on there, so you can filter your content on there as well. At the end of the day, when you're done building all that, you deploy that to SharePoint, and when it deploys to SharePoint, it shows up in your BI Center here. And so then you get essentially get a fancy new dashboard that you can then view, and you can get all that content out to your users. Now, in my case, I didn't really create much more than just a single KPI and a scorecard. Right? So that's all that mine looks like. Not very fancy, but I just want you to have an idea of how easy it is to build scorecards, KPIs, dashboards using Performance Point. This may be even a tool that you might prefer to give to your power users or your business users in order to allow them to use the power of that tool instead of having to do that from IT. Alright, I'm going to move along a little bit quicker now because I'm a little bit behind time here. So what I want to go into next, and I'll come back to the demo for this too, is Excel services and Power Pivot. And the reason why these are grouped together here in our slide deck is because with Excel, with Power Pivot is really powered, if you will, through Excel, and you really get to it by using the pivot table capability in Excel, and you bring your data into Power Pivot, which is an Excel interface, and then you create your pivot tables, and then you publish those out to SharePoint. Okay, that was a really quick run through how it works, but Excel services is used then to render those sheets within SharePoint, and they don't have to be Power Pivot, of course. They could just be Excel that you then host within your SharePoint sites. Before I go into this, I don't want to go into that yet. What I do want you to know about Power Pivot, though, when I show it to you, is that it's something that you can have users create on their own laptops and desktops and PCs, and they can then share those in SharePoint once you have sort of refined them. What SharePoint will do is it will actually store both the data connections and I shouldn't say both, but the data connections, the data, and the analytics. And it will be able to keep those in formats that can be reused, so you can make more analytical charts in Excel off of those data sources. Very exciting stuff that you can do in Power Pivot. So what else is, by the way, what else is coming that's new in SQL Server 2012 is an update, a V2 essentially, of Power Pivot, as well as the ability to integrate these things much closer into SharePoint. And one of the things I wanted to show here at this point in this presentation is that alerting has moved into SharePoint. It's a little bit of, it is sort of a BI capability. Some of this is capabilities or features that were in SQL Server before that have moved into SharePoint. Like notification services, for example, would be an example of that. Alerting was there in it was in previous tools within Microsoft, and it's moved into SharePoint now in 20. And then another new feature that I'll demo for you here in a second too is called Power View. And before I show you that, I snuck that slide in there. Before we go to that slide, let me show you what some of this stuff looks like. And then we'll go to the bringing it all together down here. So starting with Power Pivot, and this is available today. And this is with SQL Server 2008 R2 Enterprise Edition. You get this capability. And I'm on my wrong screen, so give me just 1 second. Okay, you know what I'm doing? I'm going to open it up in here because I think I closed that screen. So what I'll do is I'll just show it to you, first of all, right in Excel. So Excel with the add-in for Power Pivot is free, a free download. You need to have Excel 2010, but you can go to Microsoft.com or you can go to PowerPivot.com and you can download the add-in for it. Let me open up a sheet that already has a Power Pivot already on it, and this is actually getting analytics from Twitter. I'm going to enable that. Okay, that's fine. There we go. So this is a great example because this is actually using data that's out there on Twitter, which is nice, but also uses some of the really nice analytical charting capabilities within Excel. So, and what's nice about this too, that I think is nice about it, is that it also leverages the this filtering capability in Excel 2010, which are called slicers. So I could take, for example, just Bing as a search query, and to be able to filter out on just Bing, I can just click on that right there, and now my query only shows Bing in my charts. And then I could just have those reselected and it'll update all that. That's kind of a really nice capability from an analytical perspective within BI that you get just by using Excel 2010. And you really don't need to build out or know how to build out an analytical chart to do any of this. This is all really just creating pivot tables. And the reason why that is because let me open this up over here. If you click on the Power Pivot window, what you'll see is that the data to produce all that is stored within the in-memory analytics. So it does that by bringing data in from multiple sources. It doesn't have to be multiple sources. And then what Power Pivot does is it takes that data and it stores it all within in-memory analytics. So these tabs down here essentially represent tables from data sources. So you pull your data from different databases. It can be SQL Server, Oracle, Access, all kinds of different data sources that you can use. In fact, if I just kind of bring this up here, you'll see just an example of some of them. And you bring those in, and then you one of the key things to do this is that you manage the relationships between those tables. Power Pivot will try to automatically detect those and create the linkages for you and the relationships for you to create the cube. But you can also manage those from here to maintain these relationships. And what else is really nice here this is the 2012 version, working with data within the tabular format there within those tables. You can also view and manage and manipulate those now ER diagrams. So notice how this is really data modeling and data integration, and it's all from within the scope of Excel. And if you like this capability, what's nice is that this has been extended really quite a bit in SQL Server 2012, so that it now within SQL Server 2012 will allow you to get the same sort of in-memory analytics and the same ER diagram and build in-memory cubes all from within SQL Server Analysis Services now. And then when you publish those out to your SharePoint, so let me step you through this for a second. So here I have this really nice analytical chart that I've created here in Power Pivot. And I've done this by bringing in data from multiple sources here in my Power Pivot. And I have my cube that's essentially been built for me by Power Pivot in memory, so my analytics are really fast and I'm doing just great and I'm loving life. How do I then share this with other people? Well, this is in memory. It is essentially column compression, so it compresses very, very nicely, but still going to be a very large file. I'm not going to be able to just really email this around. So you publish this to SharePoint. This is where SharePoint comes into play. And so what you get within your sites within BI in SharePoint is you get this ability to have Power Pivot galleries. And he uses these Silverlight controls where you can then sort of, swizzle through all the different spreadsheets and Power Pivots you've created. And then you can bring those up and you can view those as reports. In addition to that, you can schedule the refreshes. So if the data in the back end changes, like in Twitter, that's going to change quite often, right? Very frequently. In that case, you can schedule that, and then you can create more reports. You could even create reports using other tools like Report Builder then off of those data connections that you've created within your pivots in Power Pivot. So that is a very, very quick run through Power Pivot there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to close some of this to save some cycles here on my laptop, because I want to bring up I'm going to run through the rest of the slides, and then before we close up for the day today, I want to show you some of the new exciting stuff that's all Silverlight based for reporting services here in 2012. I'll also get a chance to demo for you then as well the BI semantic model, which is that same kind of modeling capability that I just showed you. Okay, we'll just do that. That's fine. That I just showed you in Power Pivot. It is the capability to do that all within the Visual Studio in analysis services in SQL Server 2012. All right. So the Silverlight reporting is zero footprint. There's no client tool needed, no report builder or anything like that needed. It's a Silverlight based tool. The design surface and the dashboards are all from a web page, and it uses the BI semantic model to essentially to build those reports from. The data is put onto, so you can make a really cool dashboard and report like this without needing to be a designer. And you do that because you're going to really just use pivot tables. So just like we had in Excel with pivoting off of source data, you're just going to select your fields and they will drop onto areas on your design surface. And then you can select what type of report that you want that to be. And you can do things like you can hook up time slicers to those. And because it's Silverlight, you're going to get really cool animations. You're going to get transformations. All the really nifty graphics and capabilities of Silverlight now will be available to your to your users. And let me just make sure that's starting. There we go. You will also be able to save these reports out into different formats. You can do that too today in SharePoint. I didn't demo that for you, but you could have saved those performance point charts to Office. And the same thing with these reports here, these interactive reports within Power View will also be able to save out to formats like into your slide decks. Alright, just let me make sure this thing is still running. There you go. Okay. See what happens? They name too many things too much similarly within Microsoft, and so I forget names of Power View versus Power Pivot versus PowerPoint. See that? Anyway, so yes, you can save those reports into PowerPoint as well. Now, the idea of bringing this all together is that within SQL Server 2012, you get these features within the Enterprise Edition. There's also a brand new edition that's coming out in SQL Server 2012 called the BI Edition. So some of these things you can purchase for a licensing that might be a little bit less for you with the Server Cal model, the Server and User License model, and that is called the BI Edition. And the idea is that all of these tools, the Power View, the Power Pivot, and the reporting services will integrate directly with SharePoint now out of the box. So one of the big changes with reporting services here in SQL Server 2012 is that it's going to integrate with SharePoint right out of the box. And it will exist as a, actually I think I have a slide to tell this in a bit more detail. It will exist as a, wrong slide, there you go, as a SharePoint service now. So that also, because it's a native SharePoint service, gives you the ability to take advantage of the claims authentication within SharePoints using claims aware WCF endpoints. And yeah, so it's much easier to integrate with SharePoint essentially, and it really is a capability out of the box. When you install SharePoint, I'm sorry, when you install SQL Server 2012, you will see those options on your installer, and we'll walk you through some of that. You can still do the standalone SQL Server reporting services if you prefer to do that. Now, one of the great additions for BI is to be able to build those in-memory cubes as easy as I was showing you in Excel through what's known as the BI semantic model. So the MDX style multidimensional models within the unified dimensional model of analysis services that's been there for a long time, it still exists, and they're adding the essentially what's the Vertipack style, which is the compression and the in-memory analytics that came from Power Pivot. Yeah. And so that is being included now out of the box with SQL 2012 Enterprise Edition or the BI Edition. I'm going to show that to you. It looks a lot like what I showed you in Power Pivots, except that's within Visual Studio. So I keep wanting to call it BI Development Studio, but I'm not sure if it's going to be called BI Development Studio once 2012 goes generally available. I'll demo that for you. And what else should we say? It does not replace UDM. You can do either. I would think that you might want to think about it in terms of scale, right? Because you will use BISM for bringing data in. You're going to schedule those updates. You're probably going to want to, you're going to do Power View reporting off of in-memory analytics. That might not scale to the same level as things like, the 20 terabyte SSAS cubes that not a lot, but that some folks have out in use today in the world. Those will probably still stay within the UDM model, at least for now. Let's see if there's any other features here I want to tell you before I move on. I don't think so. I'm going to do a demo of the new stuff in 2012, just to wrap up on some of these things. 2008 R2 is focused on business intelligence in terms of the in-memory analytics with Power Pivots, with reporting services integrated into SharePoint, and the ability to use SharePoint 2010 for the BI Center and your dashboards with performance point services. The SQL Server 2012 is really focused on extending that into the engine of SQL Server so that you can natively, out of the box, be able to make in-memory analytics, build semantic models, do Silverlight, really cool Silverlight dashboards and reports on top of that with Power View. Some water. So that being said, let's take a quick look at what some of this stuff looks like in SQL Server 2012. So in my VM, my Hyper-V here of my, this is actually the CTP, this is not the release candidate. I haven't updated it on my laptop yet, so I'll just run you through this one. This is the entity relationship diagram that might look a lot like a data source view to those of you that have done analysis services in the past. This, though, is the this is the project type of a business intelligence analysis services tabular projects, which is in addition to the multidimensional project, which is the traditional UDM that you would be doing with SSAS today in 2008. So you see how this looks, smells, tastes a lot like what I showed you in the ER diagrams from Power Pivot. And this is how you can create a in-memory analytical model for your users. And I did not have to know how to create the cube. I didn't have to know how to design all that. I just needed to build the relationships around the the facts and dimensions, the star schema essentially. I didn't really need to know too much about that because it can self-analyze and detect the relationships already. But let me actually change the view back to the data view. So if I go back to the data view, again, it looks a lot like the spreadsheet within Power Pivot that was within Excel. And this is bringing data in from different sources, and you can see that here from my existing connections. And I have a connection out to my SQL Server database. So that's bringing data from a relational source. This is a SQL Server database. And then I can refresh that data. So what you can do is you can schedule the refreshes for that data. The data comes in through here, through the BI semantic model, and then is stored in analysis services. So those models sit down here. This is analysis services, looks a lot like it does today, and the databases sit under here, and I have this configured for the tabular models to be able to live under here. So once you've designed your tabular model and you have that running, what you can do then is you can then build the brand new SharePoint type, the SQL Server reporting services update called Power View, or it used to be called Project Crescent. So I think on my CTP here it's going to call it Crescent. So in this folder, I'm able to store, this is the a connector for a BI semantic model. See, the file type is .bism. So what you can do from that is you're then able to create reports off of that. So right now they're called Crescent reports. With the release candidate and going forward with the GA version, those are going to be called Create Power View reports. This is an example of one that was already done off of that, and I'll show you how that's created. But it's really just going to be using what looks a lot like pivot tables from Excel, and the ability to just select your fields and to have those draw onto your design surface. So let me see if I can grab a few more cycles back on my laptop while that's running. I'll close my Visual Studio. In case you didn't pick up on it, this is your first introduction to SQL Server 2012, and if you are a BI user in SQL Server today, you'll notice that I was using Visual Studio 2010. So within SQL Server 2012, the data tools essentially and the BI tools have been updated to work with Visual Studio 2010 now. So you don't need to go back and use SQL Server 2008 any longer with SQL Server. And I'll close this guy to give me some more cycles. Okay, so this is starting to spin up, and so you can see that what's different between the reporting here and the reporting in the existing reporting services is that this is all Silverlight based, and this is what a finished product looks like. And so this is the same URL that I would use if I go to design this too. And what's nice is you get all kinds of nifty things that Silverlight enables, like this time slicer is able to view and display the time as it changes with my data. So I essentially attached a time slicer down here to this bubble chart, and you can still drag this around. And because it does the Silverlight transitions within the graphics, that enables you to say that as a user trying to look at sales, for example, or revenue in this case, right, I'm able to see how things changed over time. Not just that they did, but I can see that there was a big change from July 2010 to January 2011. So maybe that quarter, we had all kinds of things going on, and it's easier to reflect that and to see that there. In addition, you can do things like you can include images, so that your filtering can be based upon images instead of just text within the display and design surface. So all kinds of nifty things. And then the way that you essentially edit this is you would have a person within your organization that really is responsible for these reports, who knows the data. And you look over here, and on the right hand side, all you're going to get is a series of pivot tables. And this is coming from the in-memory analytics, the in-memory cube from analysis service that's new in 2012. So it's going to be super fast, easy to access, and you just select the type of chart that you want there. So I could take this chart over here, and I can just delete that, and then I can add in some data around my let's take something from sales here. We'll take revenue up here, and we'll also take the region name and a state code along with that. And see how fast that is, because it's coming from in-memory analytics, how easy it is to build, because it's all just point and click to a pivot table. Alright, so with that, I'm out of time. We're going to stop here for this week for today. I appreciate everybody's time. We're going to have these as often as we possibly can, about an hour to learn a little bit more about SQL Server database and BI. And hopefully you enjoyed the top new features in BI and SharePoint for SQL Server and for SharePoint 2010. So with that, I will say have a nice day, everybody. Talk to you next time.